There's a nice segue. How about a top five? You kind of led me in the back door there, so to speak.
Okay.
Top five. Classic riff, Nick.
Classic riff. I would say, I'm not saying it's the best, but the most recognizable would maybe be LaGrange by ZZ Top.
Nice. ZZ Top have so many to pick from, I think, actually. The whole back catalogue. It's a really unique sound.
Well, and they were one of the bands that I grew up with. They were the ones making really cool videos on MTV.
Right.
But you didn't know. I didn't know that my uncles were listening to that stuff back in the late,
early 70s, yeah. Tres Hombres and all that stuff, yeah, these kind of albums.
Yeah, right. I think 71,
yeah.
72, 73, something like that. And so, as a kid, you're like, ZZ Top, these guys are like a new band. No, they weren't. Granted, it was only, 10, 15 years. But, yeah, I would say, I don't know. There's something, I don't listen to that song very often, but if it ever comes on, it's one of those songs where, it just gets you into, man, it's Friday. It's time to party. Or, I don't know. It's just one of those riffs that really...
it's that air guitar moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little too mainstream and those types of things, but I just feel like it's one of those things where, I don't care who you are, if you've ever even heard the song, it just puts a little pep in your step.
Nice way to put it. How about a desert island album, if there is such a thing? It's hard to earlier we talked about iPods and Walkmans, so as we're gentlemen of a certain
right.
generation, but,
Okay, well, I'll throw out, just because it comes, does it have enough tracks on there? Maybe not. Something that you said that you always go back to, right? I would say if there is that you never get sick of, huh? I hate to always say Radiohead because it's such a stupid answer. I try to get something that's a little bit more unrecognized. All right, well, you go first. How's that sound?
Nice switch. A desert island album. I mean, there's an album I can go back to time and time again, and I might be not listening to for a year, probably more, and that's the Smiths' Hatful of Hollow. And I'll just listen to it from the beginning to the end, and it just takes you on this kind of a very up and down journey. But from the sound of the guitars to taking me back to memories of the first band that I saw live with the Smiths, and just kind of standing there in awe, thinking, this is rock and roll. These guys are really doing it and stuff. But then the gig I was at got a little bit surreal because people were not just throwing flowers onto the stage. Morrissey was doing that whole flowers in his jeans thing. There was pine trees and all sorts of stuff getting brought onto the stage by the crowd. It was just, and I was 15. I'm like, I get school in the morning, man. This is far out, But then the sound of things like How Soon Is Now or This Charming Man or these kind of classic sounds, man.
Well, I mean, and for me, I never really experienced them until I was a bit older. Because I knew of Morrissey before I knew of the Smiths. Because by the time the 90s rolled around, Morrissey was kind of not real cool anymore. He was
he certainly followed that path, that's for sure.
He was respected and revered as a pioneer of that genre. I think probably The Cure was seen as they had more weight because they were still making music in the 90s that was recognized, in the Crow soundtrack and that type
and they
of
weren't
stuff.
dicks.
So The Cure was still... Right, whereas Morrissey was on his own thing, so he was always kind of the butt of a joke. But when I started to get into more stuff in the 20s, Meat is Murder, Murder is
Meat is Murder, yeah.
Which way is it? Yeah. And then the one you just said, I'm not always great with names.
Hatful of Hollow's the blue one.
Right.
Meat is Murder's got the kind of soldier on the front, from the Vietnam War, if I remember rightly.
The guitar, and when you look at Marr was how old? 19, 20 when he was writing that stuff? And I always liked the bass stuff. I always liked the bass player. I thought he was. I feel bad for him and
The drummer.
uh, yeah, because I mean they got screwed out all the
Right, yeah.
royalties, and I mean they were without the bass lines. I think a lot of that stuff would not have brought me into it as much because I'm always kind of more of the rhythm side of things. So like, yeah, no, I mean I would agree. If I okay, so 15, I'll go with Soundgarden Super Unknown. So that was probably the first. That was my favorite of the grunge bands, and that was the first album that I really experienced. And I would listen to that album every single day growing up, and I can still listen to it now. And like you were saying, right? Like it kind of, I can put it in a perspective now and have context of my daily
Right.
life, but it also can bring me back to certain times in the past. So I would say like if there's an album that I ever have to go back to, it would definitely I'll say Super Unknown by
It's an
Soundgarden.
excellent choice, man. I mean, it's best played loud, right? That's the whole point. It's just it's there's some great
Right.
playing on the album as
And
well.
but they had temperament though to throw in experimental stuff in there where it would drop off. They'd have a 7 minute song where it would just be some really cool sounds that they were experimenting with. It's got some really great, top 10 hits, but then it's got stuff that is people never heard. Um, and like I said, for my bang for my buck, I always went with Soundgarden because Chris Cornell was kind of speaking more towards me when I heard him as a younger gentleman. Kurt Cobain didn't really speak to me as much. Eddie Vedder, not as much. Zach De La Rocha, of course, Anger is a Gift, Rage Against the Machine. But I think Chris Cornell had that amazing voice and writing talent, and he was writing stuff that was up to interpretation. You could listen to it and be like, well, what is this really about? And it could hit you in a lot of different
Exactly.
ways. But yeah, I would have to say that. I hear that quite a bit.
Nice one.
I listen to it
Tell
quite
us
a bit.
someone you think's overrated, or you just don't get.
Over, overrated. Well, I'll stay away from the pop stuff because I think that's probably the Beatles.
Oh,
Haha.
there you go.
Sorry.
Aye.
I've been saying it for years and people hate me. I just do. I'll just because I'm not trying to be a
Right.
jerk. I've thought about this for years, and I've gotten a lot of people that hate me for it, or just like think I'm trying to get attention. I just never felt a connection to them. I never felt that their lyrics were anything extremely deep to me. I never felt like there was anything that was really social. They have a couple things that are a little personal, but I just felt like the writing was just. I never connected with any of it. I felt like it was a little too not catchy. It just wasn't deep enough.
It was maybe a bit style over substance kind of thing in a certain respect.
I just feel like they built upon themselves. I mean, they could have put out anything and they would have been successful. And they did. I mean, they put out some really terrible stuff. I mean, songs, I
Yeah.
will say, just things. I can't. There's not a Beatles song really. I think "Wait," that one I can listen to. But I mean, there were some songs. I mean, they had the Happy Birthday song and Rocky Raccoon. Like it just feels corny.
A bit too
I don't know.
kitschy.
Again, I know I sound like I've tried over the years. It's
Right.
not like I don't try. I don't feel musically they were as good as some of the other groups that are around. Lyrically, I think there was better writers like Eric Burton and then the Kinks, and I feel like there was people that were putting out social commentary and personal commentary that was more.
Had a bit more substance or gravitas to it or depth.
I mean, like even if you take some of the Beach Boys stuff, I mean, like again they were more poppy, but Brian Wilson was talking about some pretty deep, dark stuff that I feel like I don't know. Like I said, I I try a lot, and then I try to branch off, and I just never got it. I just never understood it, other than you have to like them because they're the
Right.
Beatles.
Well, I had a different kind of approach because I remember digging into my old man's record collection when you're, whatever it was, 10, 11 years old, and you're kind of looking through it. And I remember finding the first Beatles album, as well as the first Stones album, actually. I can remember it with the Decca sign on the front and all that. And yeah, kind of listening to them then. And then during my teenage years, I didn't really listen to them at all. And even in my 20s and probably even older, I just, if they were there, I listened to it. If they weren't, it didn't mean anything to me. But probably as I got older, into my mid-30s and then up to probably the present day, yeah, they still, I don't know, they just mean something more to me now than they did probably then. For maybe the exact opposite reasons that you've just described, you know, it's...
Well, and I think also the personal experience. So, like, I know my father listened to a bit of the Beatles, a little bit. I know if he were around, he would say, you know, there's some stuff there, but he was kind of into a little, like I said, I brought up the Animals and Eric Burt, and a little bit more, I'll just say gritty, not as polished style of things. I don't know. Like I said, I actually like their later stuff. I like McCartney's solo stuff, and I like Lennon's solo stuff and Harrison's solo stuff more than I really like. I like Rubber Souls,
Yeah.
but like, you know, when I hear like Michelle, I don't connect with it. Like again, I know I sound like a jerk.
No, that's all, man.
For picking on
No.
them. Yeah, I would say Nirvana. I would also put them in. I know I just sound like more of a jerk, but like I can't listen to them anymore. It's like, you know, what you're saying, what do you go to? I can listen to Soundgarden. I can go back and listen to Pearl Jam. I can listen to Radiohead. Nirvana, it just doesn't hold its thing anymore. The only album that I'll still listen to of Nirvana is the Unplugged, and that makes me highly depressed, so I don't listen to it. It
is
very
a bit
much.
of a somber tune, right? It's kind of, it has a, even when you remember the layout of the video or the layout of the studio, well, the candles everywhere and all that, it's just
candles.
It's just grim, you know?
And yeah. I mean, and then you put the context that it was 3 months later that he blows his brains out, so I mean, it's like, and the song choices he picks, I mean, like, you know, I'd never listened to Bowie much when I was a kid, and you know, like all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is an amazing song. He's picking Meat Puppet songs, and
Where Did You Sleep Last Night, or it goes by the other name, but
right,
the Leadbelly version.
Yeah, Leadbelly. So I mean, like, I think that was Kurt Cobain's greatest asset, was the fact that like he really knew good music. You know, I mean, like he picked stuff that people were like, you know, what is this? Especially back then, before you had, you know, any kind of way to find music.
Yeah, the accessibility was limited in certain respects.
You know, I mean, and it wasn't over the top of like he's doing it to try to sound, you know, be one of these music kind, you know, the people that pick out the most rare thing just because type of idea. I mean, he was picking really good tunes, but when it comes to Nevermind, like, it just doesn't have that pizzazz that I don't feel musically it's as good as, like, let's say Pearl Jam's first album. And I'm just picking stuff that I grew up with. You know, I mean, Pearl Jam and Soundgarden were putting way better guitar riffs, guitar solos, drumming was amazing. Matt Cameron's one of my favorite musicians ever, you know, the drummer of Soundgarden who now plays with Pearl Jam. You know, so like I just felt like Nirvana, but if you look now, what t-shirts do you see young kids wearing? Nirvana t-shirts.
It's that smiley face one, right? The kind of emoji looking
one,
or that one.
Yep.
Tell us someone who's underrated.
But yeah, so that
cut you off.
Oh no, that was it. So that covers the Desert Eye, the most overrated. What was the next one?
Let's flip that on its head and go for someone who's underrated in your opinion then. I mean, you could just basically say Soundgarden or Pearl Jam or someone, you know.
Well, I think if I went from that time period, maybe go back.
I mean, this.
Maybe go back.
You and I talked about this one before. We were talking about Blind Melon, right? You know, so there's these kind of bands like this who just kind of appear for an album, and then maybe they do another album that's less successful, and then, you know, tragedy strikes or whatever happens to them, or no one knows where they disappear to.
Right. I would probably say, like, you know, you do bring up Blind Melon, and they never come into the talk. They're always completely forgotten about. I mean, there's so many, right? And then as you get older, you realize that it's quite a common thing. You know, I mean, you could throw in like a Pantera. I mean, most people don't know them, and they were highly like influential for the small time period that they were. You know, it could be one of the best guitarists ever. I mean, I don't listen to them very often. That was the first concert I ever saw. I was 13 or 14 years old. Good thing Mom and Dad didn't know what Pantera was.
This was we're talking
Pantera
about Dimebag Darrell, right? This is if I'm right. Okay, yeah.
So that would have been. Yeah, I was in 9th grade. It was the first real concert I went to. It was Typo Negative opened, and then Pantera came out, and I mean, I was 140 pounds maybe, and not in the right place. But I would say there are. Let's go like a little later then. Let's do something a little bit like more recent that's maybe like underrated. Who's trying to like carry on the tour? Let's say like I'll go with Built to Spill. Built to Spill.
All right.
Do you know Built to Spill?
I don't, man, but I shall have a little Google of that later on.
They've been around for quite a while, since like the late 90s. And it's one guy, and he had the same band for quite a while. And they put together some really, really, really good tunes. And they got a little prominence in the early 2000s, but then music kind of changed. It's hard to say. It's a lot of guitar driven. Amazingly put together stuff, though. Yeah, Built to Spill, I would say, like, but they're not really rated in the first place.
I'll have a bit listen to that, and I'll let you know about it. Who should we be listening then to, Nick? What's our tell us someone that you'd like to tell us about that's maybe not on our playlist at the moment.
They're kind of poppy, but I've been kind of getting in. I'm trying to get my kids to listen to some stuff that like is actually won't kill me. So I don't want to listen to any more Moana soundtrack or Frozen. So I got them onto the Jungle Giants. You know the Jungle Giants?
No, I'm not.
They're an Australian band. They came out when like they came out. It's kind of that Arctic Monkey new wave that came in like the late 2008, 2009. All right, so they started off kind of like that style, really simple bass driven, and now it's kind of turned into more of MGMT.
Yeah. The kids
so
song.
Similar in that respect, where it's kind of a digital blend with some pretty decent riffs that are a little poppy, but the lyrics are kind of good. And so I started getting my kids into, because it's sort of dance music, but it still holds a little bit of, I don't know, like quality. So like MGMT, the kids like Arctic Monkey. So I've been revisiting that. But Jungle Giants, they're an Australian band. They're pretty good. Like, it's a little poppy, but it's the kind of music that you could dance to or drink a beer to and still feel like you're not going on the dark side of listening to, like, who's the guy you always make fun of there? Ed Sheeran?
It's funny that it comes back to this. This is the Billie Eilish one, right? This is where mine usually comes back to. And half the time I don't even have to say it anymore, right? It just happens,
But I mean, like, that's you see, that's what's unfortunate. I mean, I don't know. I mean, MGMT kind of went off on this thing. I loved Arctic Monkey, and I haven't listened to their last stuff. And Josh Homme, who is from
Queens of the Stone Age, and
played, he produces them now, or at least
right. That last album
they
they
put
did
together some pretty good.
The last album they did was this whole like completely different sound and completely different image and all that kind of stuff. Like the singer dude Alex went into this kind of like quasi kind of Vegas type mode and all that stuff. And yeah, I did. It was that must be 2 years ago at least, or maybe even 3 years that since that album came out. I don't remember the name of it,
so,
but I didn't really enjoy it. I was like, yeah, okay, experiment with whatever you're doing, but you know,
it didn't. Yeah, I mean, and that was the thing. I mean, you know, that when it comes to like reminiscing and stuff, when I first came to Korea, I came 2006, almost 2007, and like that, those guys were kind of, I guess, from my feel, I never heard of them in America, but I was hanging out with some British folk, and that was kind of like the underground scene that was coming out. You know, you had a bunch of them that were coming out, and like they made some really good songs there in the beginning.
The first 3 or 4 albums are great, actually. You know, they're really just one
stuff.
after the other. They kind of go in that rapid fire kind of movement, you know. And I think the way he sings, especially as well, the way he sings, you know, he sings in his kind of natural accent, or you know, you get that kind of rough feel to it, you know. And what's
well, and they were talking about, you know, I mean, it was kind of social. A social commentary in a way too, and you know, it's these guys that are in a band from a small town, and you know, experiencing those types of things, and they were kind of talking about regular life things, you know, which was interesting because that kind of gives you an insight of what's going on. And then it always happens though, once you get kind of bigger, you lose those things to be able to talk about. And yeah, I mean, I'll listen to it, but like I said, for the kids, like they'll listen to that kind of thing, because if not, we're just down. We listen to every Psy song. My YouTube got on Psy, and we were listening to like the whole Psy catalog, and Gangnam Style, and I love it, and they love it, so now they want to hear it.
Oh man!
And I'm sitting here in 2021, and we're listening to Gangnam Style,
just like the old days, eh?